So my vision, my dream is to have people immersed and sort of suffused with touch points daily of our platform, steering their growth physically, personally, and professionally.
Hey guys, welcome to the Rewire Your Life podcast. I'm Dr. Alok Trivedi. Welcome to the show, aka Dr. Rewire. At this podcast, what we do is we make sure that we take entrepreneurs, people who want to live a life of inspiration, to be able to rewire their journey in their health, their wealth, and their relationships to be able to live a life that's inspired. And today's guest is someone who's been doing amazing things in the world and has fallen back to the bottom and climbed his way back up and is now helping thousands of entrepreneurs across the world live inspiring lives. And he's none other than the famous Jeff Lerner. Jeff, thanks for being here. I appreciate you being here, man.
Oh, thank you, man. I'm so glad to be here.
Thanks, man. So you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do. I mean, you were a jazz pianist turned entrepreneur. Like, that's so different yet not so different if you really stop and think about it. Tell us about your journey around there.
Yeah. So there's two things about it that make it actually a very natural progression. Maybe three things about it, actually. I would say the first is just that, as a musician, I had already sort of defined my life that I wasn't going to be like a 9-to-5 sit in a cubicle kind of guy, right? Like I'd already made the very conscious choice to travel the road less traveled from an early age. I dropped out of high school actually at 16 just to play piano.
Wow.
So I'm a high school dropout. So that's
definitely why you're successful.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, do as I say, not as I did necessarily, but I did manage to pull it off dropping out of high school. And so anyway, I'd already had that going for me, that I had made peace with a life of relative discomfort, right? Like it was never going to be easy. Secondly is I was a jazz musician, which meant that I literally improvised for a living. I made it up on the fly. If you think about the difference between jazz and like take something like jazz or blues or, gamelan music in Indian culture, or like there's different improvisational music. But most people, when they think of, I was a kid, I took piano lessons, I sat for hours and hours and tried to play for Elise and tried not to hit a wrong note. Well, jazz musicians, we hit wrong notes all the time. And then we just make them right based on where we go from there. Like improvising is a completely different way of approaching music than traditional music. And so
I've never heard that. I just want you to know, I've never heard that I've never heard that in my life. That's amazing to realize that.
Yeah. So we would say, that was a really creative choice, and like you hit a wrong note and here's the thing, in music harmony, you can take like a C major chord, C, E, G. Most people know what that looks like on a keyboard. And I can take a note that's like super dissonant, like a C sharp, which is like a minor ninth. Like it sounds like if I just sit there and pound a C against a C sharp, you'll be like, stop, it's giving me a headache. But I can resolve it in a way. Like even if I accidentally hit it, I can just slide up a half step to the ninth and be like, see that tension and release? I did that on purpose and nobody will ever know, right? And so anyway, I was already used to kind of rolling with punches and making it up on the fly. And that's just what entrepreneurs do, right? Is you're constantly seeking how to find the dissonance. The dissonance is the gap in the market. It's the need in the market. It's the pain for the consumer. And the consonance and the resolution is how you solve the pain, or you heal the problem, or you create the innovation that moves people forward and the customer says yay and gives you their money, right? Like tension and release. And so I was already kind of wired that way. And then the third thing is, by my early 20s, I was among the circuit of gigs that I did, I was regularly gigging in the homes, doing a lot of high-end private parties for very, very wealthy, successful people. So I would go into a, $15 million mansion and sit down to a $300,000 Bosendorfer piano. Wow. And halfway through the gig, I'd lean over to my bandmate and be like, what does this guy do for a living? Right. And they go, he founded a company that manufactures valve actuators, or, he drills for oil in West Texas, or, he's the CFO of Enron. I literally played a gig at the CFO of Enron.
Did you really?
Yeah. Andy Fastow.
How cool was that?
It was a very cool house. It was not very cool how he paid for it, but
well, that's a whole different conversation.
But I mean, so here's what I started to clue into is like, wait, all these guys that are rich enough to like hire me and 4 bandmates for like $1,000 an hour to come play their dinner party. Yeah. They're all entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They're all people that started businesses. And I love my life because I get to be creative. I control my own time. But I also hate being poor. So how could I have the creativity and the time freedom, but maybe not be so poor? Oh, I should be like them. They seem to have all the same freedom as I do, but they just also have a lot more money. So maybe I should start businesses. And that's how I became an entrepreneur in my early 20s, inspired by my clients. I started trying to start businesses, and it took about 12. I think I technically failed at 11 on paper and a few more if you count bad ideas. But
what was the first one? What was the first one you did?
First entrepreneurial endeavor. Well, technically the first was when I dropped out of high school at 16, my parents had saved up a little bit of money for me to go to college. And since I dropped out of high school and I, ostensibly wasn't going to need that for college, I let them convince me to hire a computer programmer. This was 1995. And I hired the network administrator from my dad's office, like where my dad worked, who claimed to be a programmer, but he wasn't. He was like Microsoft server, certified. It didn't mean he knew how to code. But anyway, he sold his client's son, and I hired him to build a worldwide lottery. So I bought the domain cyberlotto.com in 1995, thinking, I'll have international, you'll be able to play the lottery, only it'll be in every international currency and all around the world. It'll be like Powerball, only instead of just your state, it'll be the whole world. And this was the 90s. So internet gambling wasn't regulated. I was a 16-year-old kid. I blew all my college savings hiring my dad's IT guy to be my programmer. And literally a year later, the guy had never even produced a prototype. And then the internet gambling started becoming a thing. The government, Congress passed a law that basically would have made it illegal. And I was like, it's okay, Mom and Dad, I got it figured out. I just need to I need to get an offshore gaming license. And I told them I need $300,000. And they were like, okay, we're pulling the plug here. So
man, you were innovative at 16. Let me tell you what, that's amazing at 16 years old.
So that was but here's the thing. It's sick. Like now I wouldn't want to own a gambling business because I don't actually think that does any good for the world. But at 16, I just was like, how do I avoid having to get a job? My first we won't even call that a real business, right? My first real business was at about 19, I started trying to book other bands for gigs because I was starting to get gigs for myself. And I was pretty good at talking to club owners and working my way into, being the opening act for whatever show was coming through town. So I started trying to book gigs for other bands. That was my first gig. It didn't work out. I mean, club owners, if there's two categories of people that you don't want to be doing business with, it's people that manage nightclubs and, people that play in garage bands. And I was trying to work with them both and like pair them together, and it was a disaster. So
I love it. Well, look, if you invest in 12 different businesses and you don't stop, there's something about resiliency that comes along in that, right? There's a path, a journey of a mindset that has to be taken place in order for you to be able to do that. So let's talk about that in a second, just for a second. What's your mindset when it comes to this idea of quote unquote failing or overcoming obstacles? If you try 12 times, 11 times and nothing works, what makes you say, I got to do another one? Let me do another one. Because eventually at some point, someone's going to sit and say, you're crazy. You got to stop. You got to get a job. You got to do something different. And you keep going forward. Tell me about some of those stories or some of those obstacles you went through inside.
So it's funny you asked that. I literally am just putting the final touches on my book manuscript, and I have to have it to the publisher this week. And so I've been rereading it over and over, fixing every typo and whatever. And one of the stories that I've now reread like 5 times that I wrote about in my book is from one of the earlier gigs that I did for an actual billionaire. So I was probably 24 years old, 23, 24. And I played in the home of a guy named Bob McNair. And I've actually counted it up. I played in the homes of 6 billionaires that I know of, and probably 100 plus millionaires. So like I got exposure to a lot of ridiculously wealthy and successful people.
That's a lot of wealth for sure.
And because a lot of times I was the piano player, I was just a one-man act coming into their home to play like little private parties. I would get to talk to him a lot of times. Okay. And so in the case of Bob McNair, he was the owner of the Houston Texans NFL team. The guy that brought professional football back to Houston after the Oilers left in the 90s. So he was like a local hero because Texans love their football. And this guy brought football back to Houston.
For sure.
So I'm playing in this guy's house for his annual coaches dinner. So Jeff Fisher was a head coach of the Texans at the time. He still coaches in the league. He was there and all of his coaching staff. And Bob comes up to me with this like sheet of paper that just looks like a little kid scribbled all over it. And he's like, I need you to play this. And I said, okay, what is it? And he goes, it's our new fight song. I commissioned a composer to write this. And I looked at it, and this was not music in any legible form. It was literally looked like just kid doodles or something. So I'm like, okay, Bob McNair is asking me to play this piece. I can either tell him, Bob, this is chicken scratch. This is indecipherable, or I can try to figure it out. So I said, okay, Bob, listen, man, I want to make sure that my rendition really captures your spirit. Yeah. So, because you're the owner, nobody cares more than you do, right? So do me a favor, sing the song for me. Let's sing through it together. And my hope was that Bob could carry a tune well enough that I could try to pick out the melody by ear, because it was illegible on the paper. And so sure enough, Bob was like actually a decent singer. So he sings like, go, I don't remember the song. It's like, go Texans, fight, Texans, go, do, you know, whatever, go Speed Racer or something. So I pick out, and I had done a ton of, I was a jazz musician, so we play by ear a lot of times, right? So I picked out his melody. I immediately calculated and put some chords to it that I thought, you know, what would be roughly idiomatic to the genre of a major sports team fight song. Like it's not going to be anything too harmonically crazy, right? And I literally created his melody and harmonized it on the spot, and I played it, and he was like, yes, that's it. That's amazing. So then I led the coaches in this big sing along with Bob. And so for the rest of the night, I had a new best friend. Bob was like, man, that was great. We got the coaches singing. And so what the cool thing that came, this story is all going somewhere that actually does answer your question, by the way. So the cool thing is, I said, I started talking to Bob about his life, and Bob said, listen, he said, you know what, I'm going to boil down success for you in one simple statement. He said, you know, I remember in school, they would always talk about how, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Supposedly that's something that Einstein said. He said, but you know, I wasn't actually there the day they taught that lesson. I just heard about it after the fact. And since I missed it, I just kept doing the same thing over and over and over. And because I didn't realize I was insane, eventually I became a billionaire. That's what he told me. And if you read the story of Bob McNair, it's a lot like the story of Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, only it's actually worse. Like this guy failed at like 25 different businesses from the time he was like 18. He didn't hit, you know, metaphorically strike gold until his mid 40s.
Got it.
He failed like 23 times, and then he became a billionaire. So there I was in my late 20s. I'm like, oh, I only failed 12 times. I guess I'm halfway there. You know, I just, what Bob told me never left my mind.
I love that. I love that. So when you say that, when you said that story to your friends, your family, spouses, like, what do they say to you when you go through that journey? Because
I stopped talking to my friends, to be honest. In my 20s, I basically stopped talking to what had been my group of friends. So I had a few groups of friends. I had my group of friends that I went to high school with that were all like, you know, preppy kids with like white baseball caps that went to Ivy League, you know, went to Vanderbilt or Harvard, or, you know, it was like a private school kind of thing. None of them they all thought that I was nuts. I dropped out. I was like, why would you drop out when you're in a nice private school? Yeah. And then I had my musician friends, and I loved my musician friends, man. They were so fun. Like if you got a few hours to kill on a Saturday night or something, like they're primo to hang out with. But they were not ambitious. They were not trying to do anything else. They just wanted to be local musicians. So they didn't really like me because I was always like, they'd be out on the break at the gigs having like a smoke break and talking about how they, you know, their landlord was a jerk because he wanted his rent on time. And I'd be in the gig trying to schmooze with the billionaires to learn how to be successful in the world. So they all thought that I was some kind of lame sellout, right? So I didn't really have many friends. Family, my parents were always wildly supportive of me. I mean, they actually, when I dropped out of school and told them I wanted to be a musician, they were like, look, you make your bed, you're going to have to sleep in it. But in the meantime, we're going to buy you a piano so that you can practice. I mean, they were pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah.
So I talked to them, but they lived 2,000 miles away. They retired, moved to Montana. Spouses, I got divorced twice in my 20s because, and honestly, both times, I mean, you know, there's all of this details and context around marriage. Marriage is messy, right? But at the end of the day, boil all the water out of the pan. And both of those women didn't want to be with a guy that was so unpredictable in their mind. But here's the thing. I was never unpredictable in my mind. I was just delaying gratification. I knew it was going to come. I just had to put in the time, but I could never explain that to anyone else.
Tell me about that. Let's talk about that. You knew it was going to come. There's something in that mindset. You just said something that's so powerful. Like you knew it was going to come. Tell us about that construct, that mindset, that belief that you built, that you knew it was coming, even though no one else believed it, no one else saw it. Tell me about what was going on through your mind through that, because that's deep.
Like, I just always, I don't know. See, I got bullied really bad when I was a kid. And I remember the one day I fought back, maybe the first, I probably fought back 3 times in my whole life. Right. But I remember the first time I fought back. And the thing is, when a kid that's bullied finally fights back, like kids that like to fight, they're bullies. They're not the bullied. The bullied kids, we hate fighting. So when I finally fought, it was after years and years and years of buildup and buildup. And I didn't even win the fight. I got smacked, cut my lip. It would have been better if I hadn't fought back, but I felt so good that I stuck up for myself, that I just learned that, man, it doesn't matter how much pain, how much, endurance you have to muster. The moment you break through, the moment you hit the world back, feels so good that it makes it all worth it. And so for example, when I was I told you I was 16, I dropped out of high school to play the piano, right?
Yeah.
I hadn't played the piano. I wasn't a piano player. Like, I had played some guitar when I was younger. So I knew I was naturally a decent musician, but I didn't have like crazy chops. I wasn't some kid prodigy. I dropped out at 16 to learn to play the piano. That's why my parents had to buy me a piano.
Wow. That's even a whole nother level. I thought you were already great.
And it was a calculation. It was a calculated risk to say, okay, what are the things I can do in this world where I can at least make enough money to eat and have a roof over my head and probably not have to clock in and, work for the man. Right. I used very black and white language because I was a teenager, and we're kind of, wired that way. Right. Yeah. I was like, I don't want to work for the man. I want to work for myself. What can I do? And I was like, oh, I could be a musician. Well, if I'm going to be a musician, should I play guitar? If I play guitar, I'm probably going to have to play in a band, which means I'm going to have to split the money. But if I learn the piano, I can do gigs by myself and keep all the money. So you know what? I'm going to drop out and learn to play the piano. That was my thinking, right? So I dropped out about halfway through my junior year. And at the end, in that summer, I went to the University of Houston, the local university, and I went and met with the piano faculty. And I said, look, my name's Jeff. I'm 17. I dropped out of high school. I want to study. I want to learn. Like, I'm a serious person. I basically tried to talk my way into the music program, and they're like, well, why don't you play something? And I sat down, and they're like, how long have you been playing? And I said, maybe like 6 months. And they're like, okay, listen, we don't want to burst your bubble, but we're going to burst your bubble. There is no way that you are ever going to be a professional musician. There is no way that you're ever even going to get into college to play piano. Like, go find a new major, actually go back to high school. That's basically what they told me. Yeah. Well, I don't know. For some reason, I was like, well, you get what you tolerate in this world. And I'm unwilling to tolerate a life that has no possibilities other than getting some job that I know I'm going to hate. So I'm going to use that as fuel to make these people wrong. And it took 3 years and 6 auditions, practicing 10, 12 hours a day. So much so that 5 years later, I started to get arthritis in my hand because I practiced too much. It was too little, too late, right? They were in one level, they were right. I should have started when I was 6 years old. Sure. I was trying to cram it all in, but at the end of the day, I did prove them wrong. I got in, it took 3 years. I got into college, even without a high school diploma. I got a full scholarship. I was the first chair pianist in the University of Houston Jazz Orchestra. I graduated magna cum laude with a degree in jazz piano performance and a minor in finance, again, with no high school diploma. And I had a great career as a gigging musician for 10 years. I was playing gigs with some of the same professors that told me to give it up 10 years before.
How good did that feel?
It felt amazing. It was just like hitting back. It was just like punching the bully. Yeah. And so then when, you talk about business after business after business, that experience of the piano, like, these were some of the best musicians in the state of Texas telling me that it was completely impossible for me to ever play at that level. And the fact that I proved them wrong, in my mind, it was just like, you just got to be willing to outwork and outlast. And eventually you come out the other side.
And then you've come out so far on the other side that you've hit the Inc. 5000 twice and have done over $100 million in sales on top of that.
3 times, actually.
3 times. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
3
times Inc. 5000. Yeah. I've done about 120. I mean, my business did $52 million in sales last year. So, we're the fastest growing education platform in the world. And I started it 3 years ago by shooting videos on my phone. It's like, at this point, I look at my life, I try to look back at my life, like the Buddhists say, to be like the objective observer of your own life. Right.
Sure.
And I try to step out of myself and look back in. It's like, what am I really doing? I am trying to prove these deep fundamental truths about existence and about reality and about neuroscience and about metaphysics and about behavioral psychology and about, a lot of the stuff you talk about. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like people, you can only talk so much. I'm going to try to make my life this indisputable testimony to the truth of these principles, where at this point, I'm just doing it to prove that I can, to be honest.
And that's the thing. When I've interviewed over 100 millionaires, centimillionaires, and it's one of the things that they've all told me is that the same thing is that at some point you play the game because you can. At some point,
and because there's billions of people that don't think they can, and they're wrong.
Yeah. And so when you look at it, right, you've built this company. Now tell us more about this company, this organization that you've built in the fastest growing educational platform. What's its focus? What do you teach people? What do you want people to walk away from that? So
I'll tell you how, I think the best way to describe it is the moment that I came up with it. So I was out for a run, the endorphins were pumping.
Yeah.
I was listening to Blue Ocean Strategy, great business book. Right. And I was like, what's my blue ocean, man? What's the gap that hasn't been filled where I know there's demand? Because there's all this demand swirling around it, but like nobody's honed in on the bullseye. And I was like, it's entrepreneurial education. It's business education. It's success education more broadly. So I thought, okay, let me just pull what are people doing right in the market? And I said, okay, Tony Robbins, and that cohort of people, John, everyone, Tony Robbins, John Assaraf, like they've got the personal development thing. Then you've got but in the modern world, like I've been to Tony Robbins events and they're great. They get you in a great mindset, but then you go home and you're like, well, but I need to make more money. What do I do?
Sure.
So then you have the people that are like, oh, well, here's how you make more money. That's like the digital education or digital marketing education. You have digital marketer, you have ClickFunnels, you have Seth Godin, right? And they're like, oh, well, here's actual tactics and tools for helping you make more money. But they don't really get into, my experience has shown me that the vast majority, and like what you deal with, the reason most people struggle isn't because of tactics and tools. It's because of what's going on up here, right?
100%. Yeah.
And so then you have this other cluster who's like hustle and grind, work harder, play harder, kind of like the Grant Cardone, Andy Frisella, go group. And they're over here and they're great if you're like in sales, right? If you're in something where you just need to get up earlier and work later and make more calls and push harder. And then you have this other category that's more like whole life. How you do one thing is how you do everything. Physical, again, kind of Andy Frisella, kind of like a David Goggins, kind of like maybe a Jesse Itzler. And then you have hey, all you need is love, man, like new agey kind of Oprah, big love blanket, wrap it all up, right? And I'm like, but nobody's in this bullseye doing all of it, but better. Yeah. What if there could be one place, one platform? Initially, I was thinking of it as a school, but now I think of it as a platform because it really leverages technology where you could get all the personal development, all the professional development, all the digital marketing education, all the digital marketing tools, all the support and love and community and new thought and learn, timeless principles around communication and empathy and the stuff that improves your quality of life, even without needing to make more money. What if there was just one place? In other words, what if there was a school that actually taught all the stuff that you should have learned in school instead of the useless stuff that you learned in school?
Right.
That's Entre.
I love it. I love it. So you started 3 years ago and you've had this massive growth, massive success in what you're doing, which is so amazing. It's so needed too, right? And I was just speaking with Robert Allen a little while ago, and he was saying the same kind of thing, right? And we were talking about business success, and he's like, it's all about love from the standpoint like giving and caring and nurturing, right? And Robert Allen obviously has a tremendous amounts of success. I was with Jesse Itzler this past weekend, and I was with John Maxwell this weekend. And everyone's saying the same thing from the philosophical standpoint, but you have the philosophical groups, but where do you get the tactical information? You have everyone separated, and this kind of solves that inside that. So where do you see this going in the next 3, 5, 7 years?
So my vision, my dream, and I'm like I kind of said, my life now is proving that you can make dreams come true if you work hard enough. Mm-hmm. So when I say my dream, I mean watch me, I'm calling my shot, is to have millions of people every single day interacting with our platform through all different touch points, whether it's on their, whether a phone app, a desktop app, text message reminders, eventually it'll be in the metaverse, like whatever, right? To have people immersed and sort of suffused with touch points daily of our platform, steering their growth physically, personally, and professionally. So those 3 P's, that is our axiom, the 3 P's of success: physical, personal, and professional. And the way I look at life, you should be able to stop at any given second of any given day and with absolute and immediate clarity say, right now I am growing myself physically, or right now I am growing myself personally, or right now and I don't care if you're playing ping pong with your son, that's developing a bond, that's a personal relationship, right? Or right now I'm growing myself professionally. The danger, what Napoleon Hill would call drifting, or what, theology would call idle hands, or what you and I might call aimlessness, whatever, is when you can't say in a moment, this is constructive, physical, personal, and professional time. There's like this other void that people inhabit. That's like, maybe it's Netflix, maybe it's porn, maybe it's gambling, maybe it, whatever. And that's why I would never have a gambling business, because I don't want to support people's, the opposite of the 3 Ps. I don't want to support them in that time. Right. Sure. I think that if you can live your life constantly committed to physical, personal, and professional growth every waking second, and by the way, rest and recovery is still personal growth. Part of that, 100%. And my platform can hold you accountable to that and keep you connected to not just tools, but also a community that thinks the same way, then I think we can change the world.
I love that. I love that so much, because I think it's so important that you have the community aspect, because people need it, right? Especially now, right? The time of this recording, literally, I mean, COVID is here. It's not here. It's there. It's who knows what's going on with it, right? It's like no one has a clue.
I've abandoned trying to keep track, though.
and I have too. But the reality is that we are still in that world, and there is still a lot of regulatory things, and people are struggling with that. So a community where people can actually be entrepreneurs, and I've said this many times, and you're one of the living examples of this, is that people will make more money during this COVID pandemic than they will in any other point in history over the course of the last 100 years. I guarantee it. Because more businesses are born, technology is being leveraged, and now new income streams are being birthed out of this entire process. And the people that are struggling are the ones who aren't looking at their entrepreneurial capabilities, and like what Jeff is saying here, being able to create new solutions and opportunities for themselves just like that. And what are your thoughts to that, Jeff? Let me just throw that at you.
Yeah, I mean, one of I remember, I think it was in Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. He was talking about his early mentor, Paul Tudor Jones, who I think was America's maybe first actual billion dollar net worth, individual. And he basically was saying that Paul Tudor Jones just basically like lived off half his income. He was like had a modest income, and he lived off half of it and saved half of it. And he was like, I'm just waiting for the world to crash. And then it was like sometime in the 70s, the world finally crashed, and Paul Tudor Jones had saved up like a couple $100,000, and he went and bought all the depressed assets.
Yep.
And, 5 years later was worth millions of dollars, and 10, 20 years later was worth $1 billion. I mean, it's not that complicated. Like, it's the same as like, I used to trade stocks. Did you ever try to like day trade or trade stocks?
I never got into day trading. That wasn't my thing.
Yeah, well, you're smarter than me, because it's silly, but I mean, it's great if you're good at it. But here's the thing. Here's what I actually was drawn to about it I saw that to get good at it isn't really about technical skill. It's about emotional mastery.
Yeah, 100%.
But the reason most people just get slaughtered in the stock market and they're better off buying an index fund is because they sell when stocks go down and they buy when stocks go up, which is literally the opposite of what you're supposed to do. And I think that's just how people are, right? Like the economy crashes and people freak out and they get scared and they clam up and they withdraw and they think small and they play small and they come from their, I saw on your website, you broke down the limbic brain, which I love. They start coming from their amygdala and they don't do anything. And then, when their Uber driver is talking about how he made 42% speculating on GameStop, they're like, oh, I got to be at least as smart as my Uber driver. And they go put their life savings into GameStop when they were the last guy to hear about it. And then they're trying to catch a falling knife. Like we're actually so sadly simple and predictable when we don't learn about how we actually work. And I don't say that to be pejorative or condescending. I say that to be blunt and even brutal, so that people will say, okay, enough already. Maybe I should go listen to Dr. Alok and actually learn how my brain works. So I'll stop repeating the lemming cycle, you know?
Most people don't want that. Most people want the highs, right? That's just what it is. They want the high and low cycle. And most of the world feels that they're going to eventually get there. And they, you were one that stuck with it and made it and fought your way through. But there's something about that I do want to maybe press back at you and challenge you maybe a little bit at the same time, is that you had the ability to stick through it and do something different. But you also had the innovative intelligence to find solutions for yourself inside that. I think a lot of people in this world, they don't look at it and say, okay, they keep hitting their head against the wall, but they're doing the same thing, but they're not being innovative to find different solutions around it. I think that's where I find it as a gap in the market space, where people aren't thinking, how do I go around this differently? You were unique in that space, that you think differently than most people.
I mean,
talking for 30 minutes.
I was right. I got it right the 13th time or the 15th time or whatever, but right. I also got it wrong 12 times trying to do what other people did. I'll tell you what is my superpower, like why eventually I actually made it work. I am very, very comfortable not needing to be like everybody else.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, that's what it is. When people have FOMO, they literally live their life from FOMO. They're like, I got to buy the stock because other people are getting rich buying the stock. And I don't want to be the one that gets laughed at because I didn't go along with it. Or I gotta go into that career, or I got to get that certification, or I got to try to apply for that company because everybody says it's the hot thing to do. And I don't want to be left out. So I was born with it. I mentioned that I got bullied a lot as a kid. Like this is the best thing that ever happened to me. It's like, in Outwitting, I mentioned Napoleon Hill earlier, and Outwitting the Devil, he talks a lot about what is the value, what is the essentialness of adversity? Like what purpose does adversity serve in your life? And adversity is meant to teach you to not need approval. It's meant to teach you to not care what other people think. And so I got a big dose of it very young, very early, because the reason I got bullied is I was born with a genetic condition and I looked different than everybody else. And so from literally, I remember 3 years old, kids like holding my face in the grass saying, we'll let you up when you eat the grass. 3 years old. And I was 5 or 6 by the time I had accepted, I don't fit in, I don't belong. Frankly, it was a little bit, it was actually angry before it was sane. I was angry. I was like, F these people. I don't want to fit in with people that behave like this. So I'm going to be on my own. And obviously I healed and processed through a lot of that. And now I have, great love for humanity, but I still have that fundamental ability to just not need to fit in. And so all those moments when I would have caved to the pressure of get a job, assimilate, give into your fears, go along with the conventional wisdom, accept the public narrative, you're hopeless, you're destined for failure, there's no way this stuff can work out. I had been not only wired that way early on, but it had been reinforced by these billionaires.
That's right.
That to a person were all batshit crazy. They were all eccentric weirdos. I could rattle off the names and tell you, I sat with them in their living rooms, listening to them interact with their friends, telling outlandish stories and having outsized personalities. None of these people fit in. I guarantee you they never did. Do you think Elon Musk fit in? You think Steve Jobs fit in? Billionaires don't fit in. And I didn't either. And I'm not a billionaire yet, and God willing, we'll see if that happens. But my point is, I just don't need to fit in. And that is the ultimate superpower. And if anything, I would offer that up to everybody else listening. Like, you don't need to fit in either. It's a delusion.
So good. So good. I can't tell you how important that is. The work that I do, it's about rewiring you to find your authentic uniqueness, right? That's the name of the game. Everyone is unique. Everyone is in that space, but everyone's trying to fit into a society, a mold and a model that's keeping them stuck. And that's why they get sickness, illness, disease, repression, depression, anxiety, stress. All these things come in because they're trying to be something that they're not, which is like everybody else. So you haven't been able, your journey has taught you to embrace your uniqueness. And what a gift that is. In all honesty, I'm sure going through it wasn't easy by any means. And it wasn't easy, but it was definitely the gift that you needed to stand up today. That's for sure. There's no question about that. And kudos to you for that, man. That's huge.
Like Oscar Wilde said, be yourself. Everyone else is taken.
Everyone else is taken. Everyone else is taken. Jeff, what do you want to tell people? One last thing. Where can people connect with you? Where can people learn more about you? Where can they get part of Entre? Like, how do people get involved in your world, man?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. You know, I love YouTube. I think it's a great place to get to know someone in a low pressure environment. You know, I checked yesterday. I think I have 600 videos that are live on my YouTube channel. There's many more that I've unpublished because I wanted to redo them and make them better. But there's 600 videos that are yours to consume on my YouTube channel. And you probably don't need all 600 to know if you like me or not, or you jive with what I teach, but watch a few of those. And if you dig it, you know, there's a lot more where that came from. And we have a whole community. I think we're about 220,000 students have enrolled now in Entre in 3 years. We're currently enrolling students at roughly the same rate as all the universities in the state of California put together.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy to say out loud. And if you'd like to come learn, you know, I described what it is. It's holistic education for professional and personal development to unlock business and personal success. You know, that's what we do, but come get a sample at my YouTube channel for free.
I love it. I love it. There you go. Jeff Lerner at YouTube. That's where you find him. Jeff, thank you guys. Thank you so much for being here, for being a part of this. Look, at the Rewire Your Life podcast, it's about making sure that you take your life to live it and rewire it in the 3 major areas of life that we talk about: health, wealth, and relationships. Being an entrepreneur is a journey that has to master these 3 areas, because just because you make money, just because you have a business, does not mean that you let the other side slide. The areas of health, wealth, and relationship are going to determine your fulfillment factor. Your entrepreneurial journey is about living fully. And if you can take yourself, live ultimately and inspired, you'll be able to do that as an entrepreneur, as an individual, or someone who's just looking to live fulfilled. Live fulfilled, live your potential. I'll see you guys on the next show. Like, click, share with your friends. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot. Hey guys, if you like that video, click on the link over here and you're going to love the next video.